I'd like to start with a question. If given a choice between being sold or being engaged in a conversation about something that you really want, which would you rather do? Yeah, there you go. It's interesting. I first learned about this 25 years ago. As a restaurant owner, I had the responsibility every Monday morning of gathering with 3 different vendors, getting all the bids, meeting with salespeople, and being sold. It wasn't until a company came along and started asking me some questions. And these questions got to the root of what I really wanted. I'd like to make more money and spend less time in my business. And by asking these questions, they offered a solution to how to do that. That's the first time. Well, let's kind of take a look at the 4 corners of wants-based selling. If you take a look at, like, for example, a puzzle, the first thing you do with a 1,000-piece puzzle is find the 4 corners. If you have a 50-piece puzzle, you find the 4 corners. The 4 corners of want-based selling are knowing how to ask the right questions, the benefits of asking the right questions. You need to truly understand the benefits, the long-term benefits of asking the right questions, how the closing starts with the opening. What'd I do, Bill? Oh, there you go. And understanding wants versus needs. These are the 4 corners of successful want-based selling. I recently attended an affiliated food show. Affiliated is a group of companies, a group of independently owned grocery stores. There's about 1,200 of them, and this was in Omaha, Nebraska. During that show, one of the sales guys came up to me and he said, "Larry, can you talk to Scott and Susan? They're interested in our deli." And I said, "I'd be happy to." So I walked over, sat down, and Dave introduced us. And Dave said, "I want your deli business." And he was kind of being the nice, pushy sales guy. And I said, "Scott," I said, "Dave showed me some pictures of your business. He's told me about your business. It's very clear. You're an excellent operator. You know what you're doing." But I said, "I have a question for you. Would you agree that people don't know what they don't know?" And he kind of smiled at me a little bit, and he goes, "Well, yeah." I said, "Well, let me ask you something. Can you tell me a little bit about your deli?" He goes, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, what brand do you carry?" He goes, "Well, we don't." So the next thing I asked him, I said, "Well, I find that interesting." I said, "I found that McDonald's, for example, they don't have the best hamburger in the world, but they're consistent. And I think that consistency has helped them become the largest restaurant chain in the world. I found the same thing to be true in the grocery retail business. You have to have that consistency. So can you help me understand why you do the things that you do?" He proceeded to go into this explanation about its convenience and why it works for him and this and one thing or the other. I said, "Well, let me ask you this." I said, have you ever had Colby cheese that crumbles?" His wife looked at me, and you could tell by that point in time they were really engaged in what I was saying. They go, "Well, yeah, we have." I said, "Well, Colby cheese, there's 2 types of cheeses. There's natural and there's processed cheese. And in the natural cheeses, they all have a window of opportunity where their flavor is at its best. Colby cheese, for example, is from 6 weeks from the date it's manufactured to 3 months. If you go before that, it's crumbly. If you go after that, it's crumbly." I said, they go, and you could tell they were really engaged in what I was saying. So the next thing I know, Susan asked me, I said, "May I show you this? I have a website I want to show you. Would that be okay?" They go, "Yeah, sure." And I showed them this website and proceeded to tell them about the background of the individual. And this man had been in the business for 34 years in the grocery business. And I shared his background. They looked at the website. And the next thing I knew, I had Susan say, "Well, who do I contact about getting these graphics so I can do something like that with my website?" It was interesting, one other thing. That was on a Saturday. By Tuesday, Susan and Scott had called Dave and said, "How do I get signed up? What do I need to do?" In order to have that sale, an example, I would say is a win-win. That every ethical sale provides a solution to a customer wants. It's interesting, again, they don't know what they don't know. So you have to know how to ask the questions. You have to have and see and understand the problem or fulfill the wants. How do you do that? You need to ask the right questions. I'd like to give you an example of this. Here we are, think about the affiliated food example. I asked a total of 5 questions in 15 minutes. And out of that, we were able to do the sale. So we got back to the very beginning. How do you ask the right questions? You know your products and services. You know your competition. And you learn about your customer and or your clients. The other interesting thing is during this, if you notice, I said 5 questions. I gotta get a drink, excuse me. I actually only was speaking less than 1/3 of the time. 2/3 of the time I was listening. And my grandmother always used to say, Larry, you need to listen twice as much as you talk because you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. So that goes consistent with that. The benefits of want-based selling. You have a foundation for a productive and long-term relationship. The vendor I spoke about in the beginning it was around 1990 when I first became engaged with this vendor. Until I sold my restaurants in 2002, they became my vendor and we had a great long-term relationship. It really became a win-win, which is a basis for every ethical sale. Now this one's for you, Dale. Positions you for a better margin. And this one's really for you, Dale. Price is the last thing that's discussed. So I'd like to share a few takeaways referring back to the affiliated foods example. Closing starts with the opening. If you remember the first question I asked, is it a fair question to say, do you know what you don't know? And that set everything up. I earned the right to the sale by asking the right questions. Powerful questions are always simple. They're never complex. When they're complex, you get more involved about getting in the weeds of things, and you can get lost in really the basis of what you're trying to find. So always keep your questions simple. Ask questions that your customer already knows the answer to. That's very important to engage them in the conversation. Ask questions that they don't know. That opens the door. And ask the questions to find their wants. Now there's a big discussion, you can get confused about what wants versus needs are. Dale's the one that basically summarizes or defines wants versus needs the best I've ever heard anybody do this. And I'm going to put it up here. This is a quote from an email that Dale sent. Wants versus needs. I started my business by providing a part-time CFO service instead of traditional CPA services. No one wants such things as year-end reports or tax returns. It's interesting we're doing this on April 15th. The bank demands year-end reports by a CPA. The government requires tax returns. When people need something but they don't want it, they pay as little as possible to get it. When people want something, price is no object. And it continues on the next page. Business owners wanted my help in increasing bottom line profits. They don't want the compliance work that their CPAs were doing. To me, the key is to position an offering to be something customers desire or want, not something that they need. So I thank you, Dale, for that. I appreciate that. So my challenge is to you today is to, what questions will you ask yourself to find a better way? And what questions could you ask others? Now I have a handout that we use every day. We use it in cold calling. We've used it for existing accounts.